Everyone thinks power is about having more money than God. They're wrong. Power is about making someone else pay for your mistakes while you sleep on Egyptian cotton sheets and wake up to silence. I learned that the hard way. My name is Sarah Chen, and for 3 years I was the chief financial officer of Meridian Global, a luxury hospitality empire worth $8 billion. Hotels in Dubai, Paris, Tokyo. The kind of places where champagne costs more than most people's rent and discretion is the only currency that matters more than cash. I thought I was building something, a career, a legacy. Proof that the daughter of immigrants who ran a dry cleaning shop in Queens could sit at tables where decisions worth millions were made before breakfast. What I was actually doing was building a prison. I just didn't know I was already inside it. The first time I met Victoria Ashford, she was wearing a dress that cost more than my car, and holding a martini like it owed her an apology. She was 28. I was 34. She had a last name that opened doors in every major city on earth. I had an MBA from Wharton and the kind of quiet competence that makes people uncomfortable at dinner parties. "You're Sarah," she said, not asking. Her voice was smoke and expensive education. "Daddy says you're brilliant with numbers." Daddy, Richard Ashford, the man who built Meridian from a single boutique hotel in Manhattan into a global cathedral of wealth and taste. The man who'd hired me 6 months earlier, after 3 rounds of interviews that felt more like performance art than business meetings. "I try," I said, because humility was still a reflex back then. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. "Don't. Trying is for people who aren't sure they'll succeed." That should have been my first warning. But warnings in that world don't come with sirens. They come wrapped in charm and privilege, delivered by women who learned to weaponize beauty before they learned to read. Victoria was being groomed to take over a division of the company, European operations, 12 hotels, $200 million in annual revenue. On paper, she had an MBA from INSEAD and 5 years of experience in luxury brand management. In reality, she had a degree bought with donations and experience that meant showing up to galas and remembering which champagne paired with which scandal, but she had the name. And in that world, the name is everything. I was assigned to work closely with her. Financial oversight, she called it. Babysitting, I thought, but never said. My job was to make sure the numbers made sense while she made appearances and took credit for decisions I structured. For the first year, it was fine, manageable. She'd show up to meetings with ideas that were either brilliant or borrowed, and I'd translate them into financial strategy that actually worked. We looked good together on paper, the brilliant heiress and her trusted CFO, a partnership built on complementary strengths. That's what I told myself anyway. The truth was simpler and uglier. I was useful. She was untouchable. And useful has an expiration date that untouchable never does. The money started disappearing in increments so small they were almost elegant. 20,000 here, 50,000 there. Consulting fees to companies that didn't seem to exist. Marketing expenses for campaigns that never launched. Travel reimbursements for trips that happened but shouldn't have cost what they did. I noticed because noticing was my job. I brought it to her attention because I thought we were on the same team. "There are some irregularities in the European division's discretionary accounts," I said one afternoon in her corner office. "Floor-to-ceiling windows, view of Central Park that cost more per month than most people earned in a year. Nothing major yet, but I wanted to flag it before it became a pattern." She barely looked up from her phone. "Define irregularities." "Expenses that don't quite match up with documented activities. Vendors I can't verify. Small amounts, but consistent." "Small amounts," she repeated, like the words were boring. "Sarah, we operate in 12 countries. Small amounts disappear in currency exchange and transaction fees. That's not irregularity, that's reality." "I know," I said, keeping my voice even. "But these are different. They're structured. Almost like..." "Like what?" I hesitated. The word I was thinking was embezzlement, but you don't say that word to your boss's daughter unless you're sure. And I wasn't sure, not yet. "Like we should audit them," I finished, just to be safe. She set down her phone, looked at me fully for the first time in the conversation. Her eyes were the color of money. Old money, the kind that doesn't apologize. "You're very thorough," she said. "I appreciate that. But sometimes thoroughness can look like paranoia. We don't want people thinking we don't trust our own systems, do we?" It wasn't a question. It was a warning wearing a compliment's clothes. "Of course not," I said. "I'll keep monitoring it." "You do that." I should have pushed harder, should have gone to Richard directly, or to the board, or to someone who could see what I was starting to see. But I didn't, because I was good at my job and good at being liked, and those two things aren't always compatible. So I watched, and the irregularities grew. By the end of the second year, we were talking about real money, 2 million, then 3, routed through shell companies with addresses in the Caymans and Luxembourg, invoices for services that were either wildly overpriced or completely fictional, a private jet rental that coincided with Victoria's vacation to Mykonos, a consulting contract with a firm owned by her boyfriend's cousin. The pattern was clear to anyone who wanted to see it. The problem was that most people didn't want to see it. I kept detailed records, spreadsheets that tracked every suspicious transaction, every vendor that didn't pass basic verification, every expense that violated company policy. I built a file that was damning and airtight and career-ending for anyone implicated. And then I made my second mistake. I trusted the system. I requested a meeting with Richard Ashford, not through Victoria, directly. I told his assistant it was urgent and confidential. She put me on his calendar for a Thursday afternoon in late October. The leaves in Central Park were turning gold and red, dying beautifully the way expensive things do. His office was twice the size of Victoria's. Less showy, more power. The kind of room where fortunes were decided over coffee, and people's lives changed with a signature. "Sarah," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "You look serious. Should I be worried?" "I hope not," I said, which was a lie. I was terrified, not of him, but of what telling the truth would cost. "But there's something you need to see." I walked him through it. Every transaction, every shell company, every expense that didn't add up. I showed him the pattern, the volume, the mathematical certainty that someone was bleeding the European division dry. He listened without interrupting. His face gave away nothing. 72 years old, and he'd built an empire by knowing when to react and when to wait. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Outside, the city hummed with traffic and ambition and people who thought they were safe. "This is very thorough work," he said finally. "Very damning if it's accurate." "It's accurate," I said. "I've triple-checked everything." "And you believe Victoria is responsible?" It wasn't a question, but I answered it anyway. "The authorization codes are hers. The accounts require her signature. Either she's responsible or someone has access to her credentials." "Have you discussed this with her?" "I flagged early concerns. She dismissed them." He nodded slowly, folded his hands on the desk. They were spotted with age but steady, hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts and probably a few death sentences. "Sarah, I'm going to be honest with you," he said. "This company is my legacy, my family's legacy, and legacies are fragile things. They can be destroyed by scandal or protected by discretion. Do you understand what I'm saying?" I understood. I just didn't want to believe it. "I'm not interested in scandal," I said. "I'm interested in protecting the company." "Good. Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to conduct a quiet audit, internal only, no outside firms, no board involvement. If there's money missing, we'll handle it quietly. If there's a pattern, we'll correct it. But we do this carefully. Victoria is the future of this company. Her reputation is the company's reputation." "And if the audit confirms what I suspect?" His smile was thin and cold. "Then we'll deal with it appropriately. Trust me, Sarah, I didn't build this empire by letting problems fester." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly, because the alternative was that I'd just shown all my cards to someone who was never going to play fair. "Thank you," I said, standing. "I'll keep you updated." "Discreetly," he reminded me. "Of course." I walked out of his office thinking I'd done the right thing, the responsible thing, the thing that people who believe in systems and justice and fairness do when they find corruption. I was so naive it hurts to remember. 3 weeks later, the company announced a major restructuring, consolidation of divisions, streamlining of operations, the kind of corporate speak that means jobs are about to disappear, and no one wants to say it plainly. My position was being transitioned. The CFO role would be absorbed into a broader financial oversight structure. They were grateful for my service. They'd be providing a generous severance package. They hoped I understood that these decisions weren't personal. Victoria called me that afternoon. Her voice was honey with poison underneath. "I heard the news," she said. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. Daddy thinks you've been under too much stress. He's worried about your judgment." My judgment. The word landed like a slap. "My judgment is fine," I said carefully. "Of course it is. But you know how he gets. He thinks you've been seeing problems that aren't there, becoming a little paranoid. It happens to people who work too hard. You've given so much to this company. Maybe it's time to rest." Rest. Like I was broken. Like I was the problem. I showed him evidence, I said. Documentation. "Numbers don't lie, Victoria." "Numbers can be interpreted lots of ways. You know that better than anyone. And sometimes people see what they want to see, especially when they're looking for someone to blame." The line went dead. She didn't even say goodbye. I was escorted out of the building the next morning. Security walked me to my office, watched me pack my personal items into a box that felt like a coffin for my career. 3 years of 80-hour weeks and sacrificed weekends and missed birthdays with my family, reduced to a cardboard box and an NDA that arrived by courier that afternoon. The NDA was 20 pages of legal language that basically said, sign this or we'll destroy you. Agree to never speak about your time at Meridian Global, never disparage the company or its leadership, never discuss the circumstances of your departure. In exchange, they'd give me a year's salary and a neutral reference. My lawyer said it was standard. Generous even. She said fighting it would cost more than I'd gain, that wrongful termination suits were expensive and rarely successful against companies with unlimited legal budgets. They have all the power here, she said gently. Sometimes survival means knowing when to fold. I signed, not because I wanted to, but because I had student loans and rent and aging parents who depended on my health insurance. Because power isn't just about money, it's about having so much that you can outlast anyone who challenges you. I signed, and a piece of myself died. The piece that believed in fairness and justice and the idea that doing the right thing matters. For months afterward, I told myself it was over, that I'd move on, find another position, rebuild what had been taken. But the truth about being blacklisted is that it happens quietly. Jobs you're qualified for suddenly aren't available. Interviews that go well never result in offers. Your name gets passed around in whispers at conferences and industry events, marked with a red flag that says, liability. I freelanced, took contracts beneath my experience level, watched my savings evaporate and my confidence along with it, and I followed Meridian Global from a distance, watching Victoria get promoted to Executive Vice President of Global Operations, watching her face appear in Fortune and Forbes, watching her become exactly what she'd always been groomed to be. The fraud continued. I knew it did because I still had friends in the industry, people who heard things and passed them along carefully. The European division's numbers got creative. Projects failed but were called successful. Investors asked questions that were answered with charm and deflection. And no one did anything, because Victoria Ashford was untouchable, and untouchable people don't face consequences. They just find new people to pay the price for them. I could have gone public, taken my documentation to journalists or regulators or anyone who would listen, but the NDA was ironclad, and breaking it would mean legal battles I couldn't afford and a reputation I couldn't salvage. The system was designed to protect people like her and silence people like me. So I stayed silent. For a year, then 2. Built a smaller, quieter life that didn't include corner offices or Central Park views. Learned to find satisfaction in work that mattered more than it paid. Tried to convince myself that I'd made peace with what happened. I was lying. To myself, mostly. Because some things you don't make peace with. You just learn to carry them differently. The call came on a Tuesday. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Sarah Chen? A woman's voice. Professional, careful. Speaking. My name is Jennifer Marks. I'm an investigative journalist with the Financial Chronicle. I'm working on a story about financial irregularities in the luxury hospitality sector, and your name came up. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Every survival instinct I had screamed no. Hang up, forget it, move on. But there was another voice too, quieter. The one that had built those spreadsheets and documented those transactions and believed once that truth mattered. I signed an NDA, I said. I'm aware, but NDAs have limits. They can't be used to cover up fraud. And I have sources that suggest what happened at Meridian Global goes well beyond a simple employment dispute. What sources? I can't say. But if you were willing to talk, off the record initially, it might help both of us understand what really happened. You don't have to decide now. Think about it. Here's my number. She gave it to me. I wrote it down on the back of a coffee receipt, numbers that felt both dangerous and necessary. I didn't call her back that day, or the next. I sat with it for a week, feeling the weight of the decision like pressure in my chest. Calling her meant risking everything I'd carefully rebuilt, but staying silent meant Victoria Ashford would keep doing what she'd always done, bleeding companies dry and finding other people to blame. In the end, it wasn't courage that made me call. It was exhaustion. I was tired of carrying someone else's sins, tired of watching power protect itself while people like me paid the cost, tired of silence that felt like complicity. I'll talk, I told Jennifer when I finally called back. But I need guarantees, anonymity until publication, legal protection if the NDA becomes an issue, and absolute accuracy. If we're doing this, we do it right. Understood. Can we meet? We met in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan and the world I used to inhabit. She was younger than I expected, mid-30s, with the kind of intensity that comes from believing journalism still matters. She had documents, bank records obtained through sources she wouldn't name, transaction histories that matched my spreadsheets almost perfectly. "How did you get these?" I asked. "Whistleblowers," she said simply. "Plural. You're not the only person who saw what was happening. You're just the only one they successfully silenced." That hurt more than it should have, knowing I'd been defeated where others had persisted. "What do you need from me? Context, verification, someone willing to put their name on the record when the time comes. Right now, I have numbers. What I need is the story behind them, the human cost of what Victoria Ashford did." So I told her everything, not just the financial data, but the meetings and the warnings ignored, and the way power protects itself with smiles and threats disguised as concern. I gave her 3 years of my life translated into patterns of theft and deception. She listened and recorded and took notes. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "This is bigger than I thought," she said finally. "We're not talking about a few million anymore. Based on what you've described and what we've found, it could be close to 15 million over 5 years, maybe more. 15 million, the number sat between us like a body." "When will you publish?" I asked. 3 months, maybe 4. I need to verify everything independently, get legal clearance, give the company a chance to respond. This kind of story has to be bulletproof. They'll come after me. Probably, but they'll come after me first, and I'm ready for that fight. I wanted her confidence, wanted to believe that truth and good journalism and public accountability would be enough. But I'd learned better. "I'll do it," I said anyway. "But I need you to understand something. Whatever happens after this publishes, I've already lost. My career is gone. My reputation is damaged. The best I can hope for is that someone else doesn't pay the same price I did." She reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. "That's not nothing, Sarah. Sometimes stopping the bleeding is the only victory available." The article published on a Wednesday morning. Front page of the Financial Chronicle's digital edition. "Heiress's Hidden Fortune: How Victoria Ashford Allegedly Siphoned Millions from Family Empire." Jennifer had done her job perfectly. Every fact checked, every source verified. My name appeared as a former senior financial executive who worked closely with Ms. Ashford and provided extensive documentation of the alleged fraud. By noon, it was everywhere. Bloomberg, Reuters, CNBC. The story that luxury hospitality empires don't want told, about privilege and theft and the people who enable both. Meridian Global stock dropped 12% in the first hour of trading. Richard Ashford released a statement calling the allegations completely false and maliciously motivated. Victoria's lawyers issued cease and desist letters to every outlet that ran the story. They threatened Jennifer with legal action. They threatened me too, though the threats were emptier now. The NDA couldn't protect fraud, and everyone knew it. The SEC opened an investigation. So did attorneys general in 3 states. Suddenly everyone wanted to talk to me. Regulators, prosecutors, civil attorneys representing shareholders. My phone rang constantly with people who'd ignored me 2 years earlier and needed me desperately now. I gave depositions, testified before grand juries, spent hours in conference rooms explaining spreadsheets to people who understood numbers, but not the weight of being right when it costs everything. The criminal investigation took 18 months. Victoria was indicted on 14 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. The trial lasted 6 weeks. I testified for 3 days, walking judge and jury through the architecture of theft, showing them how someone with the power and access can bleed millions from a company while everyone looks the other way. Her defense was predictable. She blamed subordinates, claimed ignorance of financial details, painted herself as a young woman overwhelmed by responsibility and deceived by trusted advisors. Her lawyers put character witnesses on the stand who talked about her charity work and her love for her family. They never called me a liar. They just implied I was bitter, vengeful, a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind. The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they came back, they found her guilty on 11 counts. The judge sentenced her to 7 years in federal prison and ordered restitution of $12 million. 7 years. It felt simultaneously like justice and nowhere close to enough. Richard Ashford stepped down as CEO a week later. Meridian Global was sold to a private equity firm 9 months after that, broken into pieces and sold for parts. 400 employees lost their jobs in the restructuring. The empire he'd built over 40 years dissolved like sugar in rain. I should have felt vindicated. Maybe I did for a moment. But vindication is a cold comfort when you've watched your own life burn down to get it. The job offers that came after were different. Consulting work with firms that wanted someone who'd proven they couldn't be bought or scared into silence. Board positions with companies that needed someone who understood both finance and ethics. Speaking engagements at conferences about corporate governance and whistleblower protection. I took some of them, turned down others, built a career that was smaller, but mine, in a way the CFO position never was. I testified at congressional hearings about reforming NDA practices, helped draft legislation protecting financial whistleblowers, became, against my will and better judgment, someone who represented something. The thing they don't tell you about being a whistleblower is that you never stop paying the price. Not really, you win the battle and lose the war, or win the war, and realize the victory is hollow, because the system that destroyed you doesn't actually change. It just finds new ways to protect itself and new people to sacrifice. Victoria served 4 years of her 7-year sentence, got out early for good behavior and cooperation with other investigations. She wrote a memoir about finding redemption through adversity. It became a bestseller. She gives talks now about second chances and learning from mistakes. She never apologized to me, never acknowledged that I lost years of my career and my reputation trying to stop her. In her version of the story, she's the victim of a system that failed her. I'm barely a footnote. And maybe that's the real lesson. Power doesn't just protect itself in the moment. It rewrites history so that even its defeats look like narratives of resilience and growth. I think about that sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet and the world feels both too big and too small. I think about the person I was before all this. The Sarah Chen who believed systems were fair and hard work was rewarded, and doing the right thing mattered more than protecting yourself. She died somewhere between Richard Ashford's office and the moment I signed that NDA. What grew in her place is harder, more careful. Someone who knows that justice is a luxury, and truth is a weapon, and survival sometimes means choosing which pieces of yourself you're willing to lose. I don't regret what I did. But I mourn what it cost. The career I'll never get back. The years I spent rebuilding from nothing. The innocence of thinking that being right was the same as being protected. My parents are proud of me now. My mother clips articles about whistleblower reforms and keeps them in a folder like achievements. My father tells his friends his daughter stood up to billionaires and won. They don't understand that winning and surviving aren't the same thing, that you can be right and ruined simultaneously. But I let them be proud. Everyone needs a story where the good guys win, even if the good guys know better. Last month I saw Victoria at a charity gala, unavoidable in this city, in these circles. She was holding champagne and laughing with people who'd probably forgotten she was ever convicted of anything. Her dress cost more than my first car. Her smile hadn't changed. Our eyes met across the room. She raised her glass slightly. Not a toast, more like acknowledgement. We'd both survived in our ways. She'd served her time and rebuilt her image. I'd proven I was right and paid the price. Neither of us won, neither of us really lost. We just learned different lessons about what power costs and who pays for it. I didn't raise my glass back, just turned away and walked toward the exit. Some conversations don't need words, some endings don't need closure. I drove home through the city, past buildings that held boardrooms where decisions like mine are made every day. Places where people see fraud and stay silent, or speak up and get destroyed, or find ways to live with complicity because survival isn't a moral choice. I thought about calling Jennifer, telling her I'd seen Victoria, that the woman we'd exposed was drinking champagne at a charity gala while I drove home to an apartment that didn't have a view of anything except other people's windows. But I didn't, because she knew. Everyone who'd been part of this knew. The system protects power, always has, always will. You can challenge it, expose it, beat it in specific battles. But the war never ends. You just learn what you're willing to sacrifice to fight it. My phone lit up with a text as I parked. Unknown number. Saw you tonight? Still too proud to play the game? V. I deleted it without responding. She wanted engagement, proof that she still had the power to get under my skin. I'd spent too much already giving her that satisfaction. Inside my apartment, I poured whiskey into a glass that didn't cost more than groceries, sat by the window and watched the city lights blur into constellation patterns. Somewhere out there, other people were learning what I'd learned. That doing the right thing costs everything, that power rewrites its own history, that justice is negotiable when you have enough money to negotiate. Some of them would stay silent, most of them, probably. And I couldn't blame them. I understood now what I hadn't understood before. Survival isn't cowardice. Sometimes it's the bravest thing available, but some wouldn't stay silent. Some would build spreadsheets and document fraud and believe, despite everything, that truth matters more than safety. They'd lose what I lost, pay what I paid. And maybe, eventually, the weight of all those individual defeats would add up to something that looked like change. Or maybe not. Maybe the system was too big, too entrenched, too good at protecting itself. Maybe people like Victoria would always land on their feet, while people like me learned to live with scars. I didn't know. Couldn't know. All I had was what I'd done, and what it had cost, and the small, cold comfort of knowing I'd chosen truth over safety. The whiskey tasted expensive and bitter. I finished it slowly, letting the burn remind me I was still here, still standing, still capable of feeling something other than resignation. By morning, the text from Victoria would be deleted from my phone permanently. The gala would be a memory I'd file away with all the others. The story would continue without me, because stories always do. But for now, in the dark, with the city humming below, and the weight of everything I'd survived pressing against my chest, I let myself feel it, the anger, the pride, the grief, the stubborn, stupid hope that maybe what I'd done had mattered to someone, somewhere. That maybe some other Sarah Chen was building spreadsheets and seeing patterns, and deciding whether to speak up or stay silent. And maybe, when her moment came, she'd remember that someone else had made the same choice, that she wouldn't be the first to pay that price. And she wouldn't be the last. The city kept humming, the lights kept burning, and somewhere between victory and defeat, between justice and survival, I existed, neither hero nor victim, just someone who'd learned that power's greatest trick isn't making you wrong, it's making you wish you'd never been right.